Good morning again, my beloved. Καλημέρα σας. Ευχαριστούμε που κάνετε την προσπάθεια να έλθετε να είμαστε μαζί, that we be together. Thank you for your efforts today. The gospel lesson is is for sure one of the best known of all lessons in human literature. It is the story of the Good Samaritan. And all of us, I'm sure, have heard this many, many times in the past, and all of us, having heard it, I'm sure can, and maybe in some cases even by rote, by memory, tell the story. And this is maybe a good introduction into what a lesson that we can receive from today's reading. Maybe this familiarity will be able to show us something that we need to be aware of, something that we all can fall prey to, can fall in mistakes too. For example, you remember the story is how a lawyer is someone who is very exact in wordage, very exact on what is being said, and very careful to hear what is being said so that the lawyer can try to find an advantage for his or her client. And that's why we have lawyers, to help us in circumstances like that. So he's a lawyer. He's a very smart man. He knows words. He knows how to use words. And it says, the Greek word says, pirazon. He went na piraxi to Christo. That's a test to tempt him, to test him, to see where he's going. So this is what a lawyer does. He wants to find out for himself, through your words, certain things that he or she may already have an opinion on. What do I need to do? Listen to the words that he's asking, the question he's making. What do I have to do, teacher, to inherit eternal life? Τι μπορώ να κάνω, να κληρονομήσω ζωήν αιώνιον? What can I do? What a broad question. And what an absolutely, vitally important question. This is among the most important questions that not only he might have had, but hopefully the same question that you and I should have on our lips, in our minds, in our hearts, every single day. Those of us that have been parents, or now grandparents, know that it is more than difficult to try to rear a child. I know that there's controversy right now too on when I was growing up way back in elementary school, back in the 1950s, I promise you there were schools back then, and we even had indoor plumbing. However, my teachers, especially my grammar teachers, English teachers, made a big deal about rearing children and raising flowers or plants. So this is the way I grew up, and many, my generation, rearing children, because it goes much deeper than just giving a kid food and water. It goes much deeper because it goes into helping that child know the way he or she is supposed to be going. It's giving that child a foundation. Rearing is much deeper than just raising something. Okay. We parents know that rearing children is among the most difficult things we will ever do. The most difficult thing we will ever do is, if we get married, is to stay married. The second most difficult thing is trying to rear a child or our children to grow up in the way that they should be going. So what shall I do to inherit eternal life? This young lawyer asks. And the same thing that we parents hopefully are doing while we are rearing our children. We know that that is among the most important things that we will ever have in our minds and in our hearts for our children. We want to do everything we can for our children. But the issue here is that I have to teach my children not by just talking about it, but by doing it. And this is the hard part. But like many of us, there are times when I'll try to, instead of be so intensely involved and pointing my finger and you should do this, this, and this, sometimes I'm a little more lax. Sometimes I'm a little less careful. Sometimes I'm paying a little less attention than I should maybe. But it gets very intensive being on guard all the time with someone, with a child, for example. Children can pick up on this very quickly. Our children, my children, and I'm sure mine are no different, or my grandchildren now, are no different than yours, in that they are much smarter than I ever thought that I would ever be. They are much smarter, much more able to look and read between the lines and see things and see openings in things that are done. So I have to be very careful, not just what I say, that's the easy part, but I have to be careful on what I do, my actions. Bear with me, we're going somewhere. This lawyer, the lawyer being a smart man and a learned, educated man, when he asked Jesus, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus' response, Jesus was a very insightful among many other things. He could read between the lines of the lawyer, and he could look into his eyes and he could look into his heart. And he, instead of answering him what the lawyer should do, because the lawyer, he knew, already knew. So it was kind of a proverbial, editorial question. Jesus looked in his heart and he said, okay, what is written in the law? In other words, you're a lawyer, you're the expert, what are you supposed to do? Don't you know? What is written? And he said, the lawyer answered, perfectly. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus' response to him was, you got it. Go for it. You have answered correctly. Do this, and you shall live. You shall have life eternal. Now let's understand something, life eternal. Many of us have the idea that, including especially our younger children, life eternal means how long I'm going to live on this earth. Most of us have the idea that this is the only life, since it's the only life I know, this is the only one I should really be involved and concerned with. It is only much later that we start understanding that life on this earth is in fact very, very short in comparison to what life eternal means. Life eternal is a long, long, long time. If I live to be 100 years old, 100 years in front of eternity is not even a blink of an eye. And the older I'm getting and the closer to that 100 years I am getting, I am understanding that truth also. When I was 5 years old, a 100-year-old person was Methuselah, who lived 950 some odd years. Now that I'm a lot more than 5 years old, many times 5 years old, 100 years, you know, ti pao ti porta. I'm knocking on the door. And I see that that's not that far, but how much more time do I have on this earth? The idea is, my beloved, life eternal, which should be the number one priority that I have in my heart and in my mind. It should be the number one, because that's what I should be preparing for and teaching my loved ones the same thing that seems periodically to fall back in any kind of importance, any kind of significance. After the lawyer responded the way he responded to Christ, and Christ's response to him, the lawyer didn't stop. And he said something else. To justify himself. To justify himself, he said, okay, so who's my neighbor? Typical response. And this is when the story of the Good Samaritan takes place. Jesus went to length in a parable to show him that his next door neighbor is anybody that he comes into contact with, even if it be an enemy. Because when he gave the story, Jesus gave the story of the people that stopped to help the man that had fallen, that was beaten up, that had been mugged. First was a priest. You'd think that the priest would have had the gumption, he knows what he's supposed to do, but he didn't. He stepped and went the other side. Then there was a Levite. These are helpers in the temple. These are people like Gary and Paul here. Take time to help us clergy with the altar services and help our altar servers with our processions and various things going on. They know what they're supposed to do, and as such, they're supposed to be even more responsible to do the right thing. They didn't do it either. The Levites didn't do it. It was a Samaritan, someone who was, if not a very strong enemy, at least someone who was not an associate of this Jewish man. It was someone who could have been seen as certainly an unfriendly, if not an enemy. What I wanted to show is look at ourselves and see how many times we, in fact, know the answers to things we're supposed to do. You and I both know what we're supposed to do to inherit eternal life. I'm supposed to follow God. I'm supposed to follow the way He is leading me, the way He is leading me. But where most often takes place is that I do what I want to do. And I pretend like I don't know. Like our children, my children, when they were in school, might not have gotten a homework or two assignment done. And we get a phone call, and one or the other one didn't have his homework or her homework. So, what's going on here? Why didn't you do your homework? You know what you're supposed to do. You know what you have to do. You know that your responsibilities. The dog ate it. I know that's an old joke, but you know how many times I've heard that, or I know how many times you have heard that? We think of all kinds of excuses not to do what we should do. We think of all kinds, and we're very creative at times, more creative in trying to find excuses than we are. We could use even half of that much energy and find the right way to do it and be a lot better off. But what I want to say, my beloved, is that we live in a world where mankind thinks he is God. And because I think that I am God, therefore breaking the first commandment that God gave Moses and us through Moses, you shall have no other gods before you. That's what it says. That's the number one commandment. And it's the number one commandment because it's the most important of commandments and because it is the one that is most often broken. That's why it's number one. I don't have any gods in my study or in my office here at the church. I don't have any pagan gods. I don't have any pictures of all these demonic features or demonic faces. I don't have statues to this whatever pagan god. So when I look at that and I say, you shall have no other gods before you, I go to the next one, or go to the next one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth commandment, and see what I can do to improve myself with that. I dropped the first one because I forgot that the one that is most often broken is the one that I most often break, and that's the one that where it has me, myself, I as God. My priorities, my beloved, are so messed up, are so turned around. My priorities when I want something from God, I know who to turn to. When I am in trouble, I know who to turn to. When I need help, I know who to turn to. I may turn to a family member. I may turn to a friend, a business associate. But I'll also remember to turn to God. Why is it when I need Him that I always know who to run to and what to say, and I learn how to beg? Please, I plead you, help me. But when things are livable, the status quo is okay, God who? This is our plight. This is the story today is a fantastic example of where we are. It's an example to show us that when we need someone or we need something, we put that as a top priority. But when things are going well in my life, that priority to that person drops down considerably. What kind of a relationship am I showing my children? What kind of lesson am I showing them that they should be following in their lives? When I want God, when I need His help for something, immediately, I'll make all kinds of promises too. But as soon as that crisis is over, I say as soon. Okay, I'll give it a day, maybe two, if it was really a serious crisis, before I kind of start distancing myself from this God. I have a major problem going on. I have an issue. God, I'll give you anything you want. I've heard that one too. I've come close to saying the same thing. Why, how can I find the means, the money to spend $5,000, $25,000, for something that I really want. I want a new car, or $25,000, used to be $25,000. Now you can go over that one a few times. But somehow, I can't find the way, or I can't find the time or the means to make a donation to my church. Why is it that I can find all kinds of things to do when I really want to do them, but I can't find a few minutes or an hour or two to do something with and for my church? It's not all rocket science. It's not all everything to the nth degree. Doing some daily things. I don't have to go up and pick up somebody that's off the street lying down because he or she was beaten up or God knows what. Maybe just, hello, a good morning, how are you, type of thing. We've said this so many times, and it keeps coming up in our lessons because it's a lesson that God is trying to convey to us now in this time of upcoming Christmas. And we're supposed to be more kind to each other, supposedly. He's trying to remind us we have this responsibility all the time. Just like I expect God to be on duty for me all the time, why cannot He also expect me to at least partially be able to be nice to somebody even when I don't want to? Sometimes all it takes is a gentle pat on the back, sometimes just a kind word. Hey, I'm sorry that you're having to do that. Maybe listen to 2 or 3 or 5 minutes to someone tell his or her story. Pain. Maybe that's all it took for that person. Again, because I don't know what's going on in that person's life. Maybe that person has been praying to God, please God, let me find a way for me to unload some of this pain that I'm having. God works through you and me. Not me because I'm a priest, no. Because me, I'm a human being. So are you. And God does work through you and me. That's what I need to remember. I know the answers. The lawyer knew the answers. I know the answers. But it's just putting them into practice, applying them. And that's what God is asking us to do. You have answered right, he said to the lawyer. Do this, and you will live. How can I top that? God bless you. Good morning.